Hey everyone, and welcome. Have you ever just looked around and wondered why some communities seem to get hit so much harder by illness than others? Why your zip code can sometimes predict your health better than your actual genetic code? Well, today, we're going to dive deep into the science behind these health gaps and explore a story that's frankly much bigger than the one we usually hear.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a pretty sobering reality check from the CDC. Now, what you're seeing here isn't just a bar chart. It's a story about the very first day of life. Look at the infant mortality rate. For Black Americans, it's nearly double the rate for white Americans. This isn't just a number. It's a profound, staggering difference in the basic chance to live and see your first birthday.
So that immediately leads to the biggest question of all. Why? I mean, really, why do these huge gaps in health not only exist, but continue to stick around in our society? We've all got our own ideas, and I'm sure you've heard some of the usual explanations.
So yeah, how do we typically make sense of this? Well, it turns out there are three really common stories, or what researchers call message frames, that pretty much dominate the conversation. Each one sounds simple enough, but as we're about to see, not one of them tells the whole story. First up is the one you've definitely heard a million times. It's all about personal responsibility. You know the one, the idea that our health is just the sum of our individual choices. If someone's sick, well, it's because they didn't eat their vegetables, or they didn't exercise, or they just made bad decisions. It's basically the pull yourself up by your bootstraps approach to health.
The second story, well, it kind of just throws its hands up in the air. It says, these differences are sad, sure, but they're just the natural part of life, an inevitable, unchangeable fact of the world that we just have to live with. It's that life isn't fair and that's just the way it is kind of thinking.
And then there's the third story. This one sees that there are bigger societal things going on, but it frames the problem as just too massive. It's so big, so complicated, that trying to fix it feels totally hopeless, almost impossible. It's the kind of thinking that leads to total paralysis.
So you have these three stories: blaming the person, accepting it as fate, or getting overwhelmed by the size of the problem. And they all have one thing in common. They all lead to doing nothing. But what if they're all missing a huge piece of the puzzle? What if science could give us a totally different way to see it, a new path forward? That's exactly where health psychology comes in.
All right, this brings us to a really critical idea. How our social world, our daily experiences with things like poverty or discrimination, literally gets under our skin. And I mean that literally. We're talking about a direct, physical, biological response.
In fact, there's a whole scientific field dedicated to this. It's called psychoneuroimmunology. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but the idea behind it is actually simple and honestly pretty mind-blowing. It's the science of how our psychological experiences and our physical health are completely intertwined. What happens in our minds and in our lives has a direct, measurable effect on our bodies.
So what exactly is happening inside our bodies when we feel stressed? Well, it's like a chain reaction. Your brain's hypothalamus sounds the alarm. That kicks the pituitary gland into gear, which then tells the adrenal glands to flood your system with stress hormones, like cortisol. This is that classic fight or flight response we've all heard about.
Now, that whole process is an absolute lifesaver if you're, say, running from a tiger. But what happens when the threat isn't a tiger? What happens when it's constant, low-grade stress from things like financial worries or discrimination or living in an unsafe neighborhood? Well, that alarm never gets turned off. That flood of hormones becomes a constant drip, drip, drip. And that isn't just a feeling. It's a physical state that just wears your body's systems down day after day.
And over time, that relentless physical stress causes real, tangible health problems. It weakens your immune system. It raises your risk for heart disease. It literally makes your body heal slower and makes you more likely to catch a cold. It's a direct biological highway from your social conditions right to disease.
But here's the thing. This biological reaction doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Our bodies exist inside of communities, neighborhoods, and whole societies, all of which are set up in ways that can either buffer us from stress or expose us to more of it.
To get their heads around this, health psychologists use something called an ecological approach. The easiest way to picture it is like a set of those Russian nesting dolls. You've got the individual at the very center, but their health is being shaped by every single layer surrounding them.
So you see all these different levels of influence. Sure, your own knowledge plays a part, but so do your friends, your community's safety, the public policies that shape your world, like are there safe parks for you to even be active in, and of course, the kind of healthcare you can get.
The bottom line is, our health is not just about our personal choices, it is profoundly shaped by the world we live in.
Okay, so if those old stories about personal choice are incomplete, and we now know that our environment actually shapes our biology, then it's time for a really big idea. Maybe we've been asking the wrong questions this whole time.
And this is where you see a huge fundamental shift. Instead of asking, how can we get people to change their behaviors? The new question becomes, how can we change the dangerous conditions in their environment? How do we make sure that everyone has a fair shot at living in a healthy and safe place?
Let's look at another one of these shifts. The old way puts all the responsibility on the individual to protect themselves. But the new question is about all of us. How can we, as a community, work together to create policies that protect everybody? It moves the whole conversation from individual survival to our shared well-being.
This whole new way of asking questions, well, that's the absolute heart of what's called health equity. It's a framework that sees health not just as a personal issue, but as an issue of justice. It's all about fixing the unfair distribution of the very conditions, like poverty and racism, that we now know cause that chronic stress and lead to disease.
And really, that's the most important takeaway here. If we want to change that stark reality we saw on that first chart, we have to move past those old, tired stories. We have to start asking new, and yeah, maybe more difficult questions. Because that shift in perspective, that's our most powerful tool for creating real change. So I'll leave you with the ultimate question that this health equity way of thinking pushes us to ask. It's not just why are some people sick, it's what is it about our society that's causing the unequal distribution of the very things that make people either sick or healthy in the first place? It's a massive question, for sure, but it's the one we need to be asking. Thanks so much for joining me.